Amigas, amigos, muchas gracias por estar en una emisión más de Voces Públicas. En días pasados, el presidente Andrés Manuel López Obrador ofreció el asilo político a Julian Assange. Julian Assange, un luchador por la libertad de información, por la libertad de expresión, por el Internet libre, se encuentra detenido en una prisión de alta seguridad en Gran Bretaña ya desde hace varios años, incluyendo los 2 años de la pandemia. Y precisamente para poder reforzar la causa de la liberación y de la libertad de Julian Assange, desde el jueves 8 de septiembre están en México el hermano de Julian Assange y el padre de Julian Assange, que hoy están con nosotros. Es para mí un honor y un placer tener a John y a Gabriel Shipton, que nos van a explicar, porque ahora ellos son los voceros, son la voz de alguien al que le han quitado la voz, a quien lo han forzado a tener que callar. Y por esta situación, en esta entrevista, queremos abordar justo los detalles del caso. Querido John, muchas gracias. Muchas gracias por estar aquí con nosotros. Sé que están muy cansados, ha sido una gira muy intensa. En este momento, ¿cuál es la situación jurídica de Julian? En espera de qué estamos, en qué momento del proceso judicial estamos.
Well, seems the court cases seem to be interminable, you know. So far, I think I count up 23 or 24, and then I lose count. But currently, there's an application to the High Court for a review or
Y esta revisión sería para revisar la decisión de mantenerlo en la prisión de Belmarsh.
No, it's a process. So there's the application Julian puts in on a number of points for a review or an appeal, and then the United States has an opportunity to put their points in, and that will take they have asked for an extension of time, so that will take a total of 12 weeks. That's about 10 more weeks. After that, a single judge from the High Court will decide whether an appeal can go ahead. So you ask for permission to appeal. So that's another 2 court cases. After which there'll be a decision indicating whether Julian has to be extradited to the United States immediately, or the appeal is successful. Julian doesn't have to be extradited.
This is his last chance in the UK courts. Yeah, the Home Secretary signed off on the extradition in June 17, and this is the last chance that Julian has within the UK court system to appeal that decision.
Perfecto. ¿Qué diferencia o en qué ayuda el ofrecimiento del presidente mexicano Andrés Manuel López Obrador de darle asilo a Julian Assange en este contexto? ¿En qué ayuda?
Well, you know, we characterize AMLO's help as gold and a river of gold, because President López Obrador is the first sitting president to make his position known and his support of Julian Assange. Mexico is a neighbor of the United States and consequently a very, very important participant in press freedom and support for journalism in supporting Julian Assange. And we give thanks to the President and to the government that supports the President and to the people that support the government.
El presidente Andrés Manuel le entregó una carta al presidente norteamericano Joe Biden con una argumentación muy extensa sobre la necesidad de cancelar la solicitud de extradición a Estados Unidos de Julian Assange. ¿Ustedes conocen si hay alguna respuesta por parte del gobierno de Biden a la petición del presidente Andrés Manuel López Obrador?
No, we haven't heard anything from the Biden administration, but what we do have, which is equally important, is the Prime Minister of Australia is now made public his support for Julian Assange. So, as you know...
Recientemente?
Recently, yes. After his election, by the way. I note that the current Australian government was elected on a platform of support for Julian Assange. So both AMLO and Prime Minister Albanese are a formidable duo in the procedure to bring about Julian's freedom and consequently to reinforce the capacity of journalists and publishers to publish and comment on policy of government.
Exacto. La nueva primera ministra de Gran Bretaña, en este contexto en donde tanto se está hablando de Gran Bretaña y de las libertades en Gran Bretaña y de la situación de los ciudadanos bajo la corona británica, ¿se ha pronunciado o ha dicho algo al respecto? La nueva primera ministra.
Well, currently, on the 8th of October, there will be many thousands of people surrounding the Parliament and across the two bridges and down the other side of the river. You can't go in front of the Parliament because the Parliament fronts onto the Thames River. So it will be many, many people surrounding the Parliament in a demonstration of support for Julian Assange. Similarly, in Washington, D.C., in the United States, a group of supporters, again many thousands, will surround the Department of Justice. They're two significant events running in parallel with President Obrador's support, the letter to President Biden, and the statement of Prime Minister Albanese.
El día de hoy, jueves 14 de septiembre, el gobierno de la Ciudad de México le entregó las llaves de la ciudad a Julian Assange a través de John y de Gabriel. Y hace unos minutos pudimos saber que usted se estaba comunicando con Julian Assange en este periodo muy breve de 10 minutos. Permítanos saber qué fue lo que le comentó Julian sobre este hecho y sobre la visita y la gira que han realizado en México.
Yes, Julian said that the gift of the key to the city of Mexico is very heartening.
Genial, genial.
The other discussion we had was briefly speaking about how wonderful it is that President Obrador has made his support, firm support, known to the United States.
Genial. Perfecto. Gabriel, En esta gira también se ha estrenado en México un documental producido por ti, Ítaca. El documental, para quienes no lo han visto, espero que lo podamos transmitir pronto en las señales de los medios públicos mexicanos, es el relato de esta historia, de la lucha de John y de la esposa también de Julian, de enfrentar este aparato terrible y opresivo de injusticia y de señalización o de estigmatización contra Julian Assange y en realidad contra todo periodista que tenga la osadía de enfrentarse a Estados Unidos o al imperio. ¿Cuál es el objetivo de este documental, Gabriel, y cómo has sentido la reacción de la gente en México y en otras partes que ha visto el documental?
Well, what we set out to do with Ithaca is tell a different side to Julian's persecution, a side that we, as Julian's family, experience. In the media for the last 10 years or so, in the corporate media, Julian's been demonised, mobbed, slandered over and over again, particularly in the UK, the US, and Australia, those states. So really, we have this issue where we, try to get how do we talk about the Julian that we know? How do we tell a different side of the story to what people understand about Julian through the media or through interviews with Julian? Like, how do we experience Julian? How does Julian the man, that is, he's not just a symbol. He's not just a symbol of freedom of expression, of freedom of communication, but there is also a man there, a father. He has 2 small children, a husband, a brother. And so we set about to tell that story, to tell a personal side of the story, behind the scenes side of this story that is about John and about Stella and their fight to free Julian. And it's through John and Stella that we learn about Julian. It's through the people who love him the most. And it's this emotional journey that allows us to connect to a broader audience, an audience that might not read the newspaper or might not engage with media or really have that much involvement with politics or freedom of expression. So with this emotional story about a father, about a wife fighting for their son, we hope to engage with a broader audience and get the message out to these people that what's going on here, this amazing, huge threat to press freedom, to our right to know what our governments do in our names. And so it's that emotional journey, it's that essence of a father's fight for his son, because what parent wouldn't do anything for their child, that we connect with people. And the reception here in Mexico has been incredible. I mean, I haven't really experienced it anywhere else in the world. We've done a large tour with the film in Australia. It's been on the public broadcaster there and also in the UK, but it seems that Mexican audiences connect with this fight a lot more. I'm not sure what it is. I think it might be the importance of family here in Mexico. I think that's something that I've seen.
Exactly.
I've noticed here that people are coming to the screening and they're bringing their mother, they're bringing their grandmother to the screening, and we haven't seen that anywhere else. So I think it's that real, the family values and people's experience here with persecution that they can really connect with this story about John and Stella.
Quizá porque también en México tenemos un problema de impunidad y de injusticia muy grande. Hay muchísimas personas injustamente encarceladas en México de muchos años atrás, y de una u otra manera es efectivamente el hecho de que sea una batalla de una familia, no de un individuo, y de un movimiento a favor de la libertad de expresión. Creo que también esto ha ayudado. ¿Lo consideras así?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah, that experience, you know, people who lose their loved ones, whose loved ones are, you know, persecuted in one way or another will immediately connect with this story. And I think, particularly in Latin America, you're not too far removed from this type of persecution, and the experience with, you know, what WikiLeaks, the revelations that WikiLeaks brought to Latin America, how the United States interfered with governments, interfered with elections, you know, interfered in politics all over Latin America. I think that resonates with audiences here as well. And often we see when we're, you know, when we're in Australia or in America or even in the United States, the most activists, the people on the street who are you know, cheering for Julian, who are pushing for his freedom, are people from this part of the world, you know, Mesoamericans, Latin Americans, because they connect straight away with the persecution that Julian's going through.
Exactamente. Vamos a un corte y ahorita regresamos. No nos dejen, seguimos en Voces Públicas. Muchas gracias.
Voilà, mademoiselle.
Esto parece una película.
Quiero todo el dinero.
Mejor me salgo.
No, mejor se voltea.
Somos la misma persona.
Entonces esta carta es para usted.
Cinema 14 presenta Con el amor no se juega. Lunes, 23:30 horas. Por Canal 14.
A ese coche se lo llevó el agua.
En temporada de lluvias hay que tomar precauciones. Nunca cruzar la corriente en una inundación.
Tan solo 50 centímetros de agua pueden llevarse un coche.
Consulta los pronósticos del Servicio Meteorológico Nacional.
Ten una mochila de emergencia.
Agua potable.
Protege tus documentos.
Y hazle caso a las alertas de protección civil.
Esta temporada de lluvias y ciclones, juntos nos protegemos mejor.
La Conagua y el Servicio Meteorológico Nacional te informan por tu seguridad.
Gobierno de México.
Amigas, amigos, continuamos en esta entrevista especial de Voces Públicas por la libertad de Julian Assange. Platicamos con John y Gabriel Shipton sobre la importancia de mantener viva la demanda y la exigencia de la liberación de Julian Assange, porque no solamente es la liberación de una persona, sino de todo un ecosistema de medios y de libertad de expresión. En el documental producido por Gabriel, Ítaca, John menciona algo que a mí me pareció muy conmovedor y muy claro, que Julian Assange es como Prometeo, un Prometeo encadenado en estos momentos. ¿Por qué es un Prometeo contemporáneo?
Well, I use Prometheus in two parts. First of all, the ancient Greek legend of Prometheus bringing fire to mankind, and as a consequence, the gods chaining Prometheus to a rock, and an eagle comes each day and tears out his liver. Each night, his liver is repaired, and this goes on through eternity. But the poet, the great poet Percy Bysshe Shelley, wrote a poem which parallels the Greek legend, and it goes to say it's Prometheus unbound. How do you remove the chains from Prometheus? How can he be free? And I use that parallel for Julian and for all people. And the way to freedom is knowledge. The chains that bind us can be unbound by knowledge. And only one path to freedom, and that is through knowledge. And this applies, as you mentioned in your preamble, it applies to having a free press which allows us to communicate on a basis of knowledge with each other.
La otra figura mítica muy fuerte es Ítaca, el poema de Cavafis, que le da nombre al documental. ¿Por qué escogiste ese nombre, Gabriel?
Well, because we travel around the world all the time advocating for Julian, and it was, some days are better than others. Today was a great day. We were given the keys to Mexico City. We accepted them on behalf of Julian. There are days like this which are, happy days, but there are also days which things don't go our way, and we can get very, down and very hard, to keep things in perspective. So particularly when we're in the US, John used to listens to the poem Ithaca, when things aren't going right, by Cavafis, a Greek-Egyptian poet. And really, it's about, I sort of use it as an allegory for activism, that, fighting for something that's bigger than yourself, that, your Ithaca is the end of your journey, but really it's what you learn or the people you meet or the experiences you have or the things that you learn on your way to Ithaca, and that what makes life essentially is that the things you find on the way to Ithaca, and that when you reach Ithaca you won't arrive there poor, you'll arrive there rich, with all the experiences and all the friends and all the things that you've accumulated on the journey. The poem also talks about fear and how to conquer that fear, and that the fear you bring along with you, in your mind. And so I think that's very helpful when you're up against an adversary, that is the biggest state in the world. How do you keep going, and how do you keep going forward towards Ithaca? And that poem really helps us in those dark moments.
There is a line in the poem,
yes,
which goes to say, when you come into a city for the first time, with what joy. And that, if I may say, that applies to us in coming into Mexico City. With what joy that our time has been here. Yeah.
Wow.
So the poem covers, as you know, of course, that it's a journey of every man.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. So you come into a city like Mexico, with what joy you experience.
Así es. Lástima que la Ítaca de la Ciudad de México tiene mucho tráfico a veces, pero no deja de ser un buen viaje. En este viaje hay traiciones. Y si alguien, desde mi punto de vista y desde muchos, ha sido traicionado, ha sido Julian Assange. El hecho de que los grandes corporativos mediáticos, los grandes periódicos británicos, norteamericanos, mexicanos incluso, latinoamericanos, australianos, que pues difundieron todos los más de 300,000 cables que se conocieron a través de Wikileaks, han guardado silencio a partir de esta campaña obsesiva, persistente, permanente, por desacreditar al mensajero, no al mensaje, sino al mensajero. Gabriel, ¿por qué crees que esto ha sucedido? Los grandes medios, por ejemplo, The Guardian, The New York Times, The Washington Post, ¿los han buscado ahora a ustedes? ¿Los han entrevistado?
I think so. I think why this is happening, we have to sort of go back to the beginnings of WikiLeaks and these revelations. You know, that these corporate media, these legacy media, they all benefited greatly from all of these scoops, all of this information that was released to the world. They all cooperated with WikiLeaks. They were partners all together. But as time passed on, there was this phenomena that took place, and this, we see this over and over again, is that the criminals and the perpetrators of these crimes that were exposed, to take the spotlight off them, they turn it around and put it on to Julian. And so it's no longer about their crimes, it's no longer about their war crimes, their corruption, you know, how they interfere in politics around the world. They make it about Julian, the man. And the corporate media saw WikiLeaks as a disruptor. You know, it disrupted their business model, because usually they would have the leak and they would keep it for themselves. They wouldn't allow people to read it, you know, so they could had this monopoly on leaks.
Exactly.
And so with WikiLeaks, there was this sort of scientific journalism, if you want, that was being able to be done. You could actually, people could go and say, okay, here is the leak and here is the report, and compare them and say, well, this newspaper is not telling the truth. And so I think these newspapers saw it as convenient to help these unprosecuted criminals turn the spotlight onto Julian, because it was a threat. They saw that their business model was being disrupted. But since 2019 and since this 17-count Espionage Act indictment has come from the US, and it's now sort of laid bare for everyone to see that this is what Julian's being prosecuted for, is what journalists and publishers do every day. You know, they source classified information and they publish it. And so I think we've seen over the past 2 years, 3 years, probably more so in the last year, is that the corporate media are realising, holy shit, this could be used against us. This Espionage Act prosecution could be used against us. And so slowly we're seeing a turnaround now. You know, The Guardian, which, you know, these media entities are sort of almost partly responsible for Julian's persecution, but now they're changing their tune. And so you've got publications like The Guardian in the UK coming out and saying that Julian should not be extradited. You know, multiple editorials coming out and saying that Julian shouldn't be extradited. They even gave Ithaca a 4-star review. You know, so these are and this is also in the Telegraph, the Financial Times in the UK. The Times, all the largest newspapers in the UK are saying that Julian shouldn't be extradited. And we're seeing the same thing in Australia and also in the US. You know, the New York Times executive editor, has written that this is a threat, a huge threat to press freedoms and the First Amendment in the US. Washington Post executive editors have said the same thing. And also in the US, you have all these civil society organisations. So 25 of the largest human rights and press freedom organisations in the US have written multiple letters to President Biden, public letters, saying that this prosecution is a threat to press freedoms. It's a threat to the First Amendment, to people's democratic rights to know what governments do in their name. And it's not just a threat to the people in the US, but all over the world, the extraterritorial nature of this. You know, Julian, he's an Australian. He didn't publish in America, like he wasn't in America, but he's been detained in the UK for the past 4 years in a prison. And so people can see around the world that this could happen in anywhere. You know, any journalist who wants to report on the US security state or national security of the US or say, you know, crimes of the CIA or anything like that, they could just be an Espionage Act prosecution, snatched, put in a jail. And so that's really what's happening. This message has been sent around the world to everyone that if you do this, if you report on these sorts of things, this will happen to you. So I think we've seen that silencing, that sort of chilling effect across the media landscape as well, which is why these media organisations now are coming out and being more vocal. I think they certainly could be even more vocal because, you know, if they all got together and decided that this is something they don't want to go ahead, it would be dropped in a second.
Eso es algo que dice muy bien Stella Assange en el documental. Dice, el tema de la extradición es un 90% un tema político, no un tema jurídico. Y justo, muy poca gente sabe que Julian está acusado de espionaje. Es decir, alguien que no espió, que no tiene un sistema de vigilancia mundial, que no es el dueño de las grandes plataformas de Internet, como son Facebook, como son Google, como son Amazon, que nos espían todo el tiempo, ya lo dijo Edward Snowden. Él está siendo acusado de espionaje. Una ley, si estoy mal, me corrigen, que proviene del siglo XIX, de 1917. ¿Qué cargos específicamente está señalando Estados Unidos para acusarlo de espionaje? ¿En qué sentido él es espía, según la denuncia de Estados Unidos?
Well, as I said, if you read the indictment, it's exactly, he's charged with exactly what journalists do every day. One of the actual charges is for solely possessing classified information. And so, you know, when we travel in the US, we tell these reporters, you know, one of these charges, one of these 17 Espionage Act charges is solely for possessing classified information. And do you, as a journalist, have classified information? So every newsroom in the world has some form of classified information. And so, you know, as soon as journalists realise, oh, what, you know, they're charging him with the use of this archaic law that's sort of so been repurposed to, you know, go after journalists. It's a total farce, this whole case. I mean, like you say, it's 99% political. These charges are, you know, they're just sort of a fiction in that sense. And that's why it's so important that, you know, leaders like President Obrador are coming out and, you know, making this a political case, you know, taking it to the Biden administration and telling them, you know, you should drop this because if other states say, well, we can't interfere because this is a judicial process in the UK or it's up to the judicial process in the US, then Julian will stay in prison forever.
Así es. Vamos a un corte y nos vamos a la última parte de la entrevista. Les agradezco muchísimo. No nos dejen, seguimos aquí en Voces Públicas.
Para ti que vives en Estados Unidos, pero quieres seguir participando en la transformación de nuestro país, nace TV Migrante. Encontrarás contenidos informativos, culturales y de entretenimiento que reflejan la realidad de quienes migraron. Accede a TV Migrante desde la aplicación gratuita de MX Play y a través de cualquier dispositivo móvil. México está donde tú te encuentres. MX Play. 126 millones de habitantes merecen información confiable y oportuna. Informativo 14. La realidad sin filtros. Periodismo de investigación que busca la verdad. Es tu derecho. Informativo 14. Lunes a viernes, 20 horas. Canal 14. Tus causas, tu canal.
Uy, a ese coche se lo llevó el agua.
En temporada de lluvias hay que tomar precauciones. Nunca cruzar la corriente en una inundación.
Tan solo 50 centímetros de agua pueden llevarse un coche.
Consulta los pronósticos del Servicio Meteorológico Nacional.
Ten una mochila de emergencia.
Agua potable.
Protege tus documentos.
Y hazle caso a las alertas de protección civil.
Esta temporada de lluvias y ciclones, juntos nos protegemos mejor.
La Conagua y el Servicio Meteorológico Nacional te informan por tu seguridad.
Gobierno de México.
Amigas, amigos, continuamos en Voces Públicas. Estamos platicando con John y Gabriel Shipton, padre, hermano de Julian Assange, la importancia que ha adquirido la causa de la libertad de Julian Assange es una importancia que va más allá del tema individual de solo una persona. Está en juego pues todo el ecosistema periodístico, porque si Julian Assange es extraditado a Estados Unidos bajo los cargos de espionaje, sienta un precedente terrible, no solo para Wikileaks o para quienes publicamos información que sea clasificada por los estados, sino para todos los políticos, los ciudadanos, los colectivos. Esta es la característica política más importante del caso de Julian Assange. Pero también hay algo que en el documental de Ítaca queda muy claro. Constantemente se le ha querido relacionar a Julian Assange como si fuera un peón de Vladimir Putin o un peón o un aliado de China o de fuerzas que son consideradas enemigas por Estados Unidos. Recientemente, en las elecciones del 2016, a raíz de los cables filtrados sobre Hillary Clinton, se volvió a mencionar este tema de Putin, ¿no? ¿Qué lectura hacen ustedes de este asunto, John? ¿Por qué constantemente se le ha tratado de vincular?
This is a very profound and good question. You know, this Hillary Clinton, who organized the destruction of Libya, killing 60,000 people and ruining the most prosperous country in Africa. This person who organizes the spying on diplomats in the United Nations building, this person who diverts attention from her own criminality, from her own corruption, from the illegality of actually having in the basement of her building a computer which contained state secrets, diverts attention from herself making these absurd accusations about Julian Assange. I mean, we can see that it's grotesque that a well-known, worldwide war criminal diverts attention from her own crimes by using the power of her position in government to cause anybody from the bully, we call it the bully pulpit, as a spokesperson of government, Secretary of State of the United States, diverts attention from the organisation of destruction of an African country. And we witness Secretary of State Hillary Clinton watching on TV the murder of the president of Libya by a bayonet shoved up his anus, and then making the giggling and joyful statement, "We came, we saw, he died," in a hideous parallel to Julius Caesar in Shakespeare's play, "We came, we saw, we conquered." These people are utterly uneducated and completely second-rate, and in no account should anybody take any notice of what they say, only of what they do. And that was the organisation of the destruction of Libya and the murder of 60,000 people. And now you cannot, as a mother, go down the shop in Libya, in Tripoli, to buy food to feed your family without fear of being robbed or kidnapped. There's actually a slave market in Tripoli. The whole thing is a burden of disgrace upon the United States that will last a century.
Wow. Ella pudo haber sido la presidenta de Estados Unidos, es decir, ¿ustedes sintieron que se intensificó o se agudizó el ataque contra Julian en esa campaña electoral del 2016? Y si fue así, ¿qué sucedió con Donald Trump? Donald Trump, presidente de Estados Unidos, ¿cambió el trato o las acusaciones contra Julian, o disminuyeron, o se quedó todo igual? Gabriel or John?
Well, yeah, I mean, sort of have to remember that a lot of people voted for Trump. There was he did win the presidency in the end, and so it was the by their rules he had got the most votes. So it is still, people often forget that and try and a lot of Americans voted for him. I think after 2017, there was when Mike Pompeo became CIA director, in his first speech, he singled out Julian and WikiLeaks and named them something that nobody had heard of before. He named them non-state hostile intelligence service. So at the time, people didn't really understand what this meant. But now, after these years, and after some reporting that was done, we understand that this designation, non-state hostile intelligence service, allowed the CIA to carry out operations against WikiLeaks, similarly that they would have carried out against, say, the Russian FSB or the Iranian intelligence services.
Al-Qaeda.
Yes, so these sort of not actions that are not sanctioned by Congress or Senate. So these aggressive spying actions, and it's at that time in the Ecuadorian embassy that things started to change for Julian. That the security company who was actually hired by Ecuador to protect Julian became an asset of the CIA and started to record Julian's meetings with his lawyers, started to bug all these places in the embassy. And this coincides also with the change of government in Ecuador. And so that's, when Lenin Moreno came to power. Yes, and he decided to bring Ecuador closer to the US and had a $4 billion loan approved by the IMF. And, we see that and understand that that was almost like a payment for Julian, for getting Julian out of the embassy, for stripping him of his Ecuadorian citizenship, for stripping him of his rights of asylum, and in an unprecedented event throughout the world, opening the door to the Ecuadorian embassy and saying, come in to the UK police, come in and arrest this man who used to be a citizen of Ecuador, this man who used to have asylum in the embassy. And that's why this is another point that shows how political this charge is, how politically motivated these charges against Julian are, is these actions by the Ecuadorians, the actions of the CIA that were confirmed in a report in this investigation, a 6,000-word investigation done by 3 investigative journalists in Washington, D.C. They had sources inside the intelligence community who told them that there were plots within the CIA to kidnap Julian from the embassy, plots to assassinate him. The plot to kidnap him went all the way to the White House. And in the article it says, the Department of Justice said, well, when you kidnap him, we haven't charged him with anything. So let us get some charges together so that when you actually take him out of the embassy, we have a charge to put forward.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that's the situation around that. And it was after that point, after Mike Pompeo, as CIA director, made that statement. And that was under the Trump presidency as well. So a lot of people say, oh, Julian helped Trump get elected, this and that. But really, at the end of the day, it was during the Trump presidency that this really ramped up.
Exact.
Yeah, and this sort of, this persecution, what the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture calls psychological torture. It was after 2017 that was taken to another level.
I'd like to add just an observation that's really important and vital in South America. In 1973, at the prompting of South American nations, the Conventions of Asylum were ratified by the United Nations General Assembly. Now, at that time, there were 10,000 asylees in embassies and missions in Santiago after the Pinochet coup against the Allende government. The opening of the Ecuadorian embassy to police in the United Kingdom is particularly important in South America, for over the years embassies have been used as respite from persecution. And just recently we had the example here of Evo Morales given asylum in Mexico. So what Lenin Moreno has done has brought ruin to his reputation and a precedent to the circumstances of asylum in embassies in South America. It's shameful, and it would need a statement from the Organization of American States that this not be a precedent. And we advocate that in our contacts in the Organisation of the American States, that such a statement had best be made very soon, that this not be a precedent in South America, opening your doors of the embassy, which is part of your land, to police, to remove an asylee without due process.
Es una violación a la inmunidad diplomática lo que ocurrió. Es decir, nadie está pagando por la violación a esa ley, a la ley de violar la inmunidad diplomática de una embajada, como ocurrió con la embajada de Ecuador. Ahora, la situación con el gobierno de Biden y con el Congreso actual de Estados Unidos ha cambiado. ¿Hay aliados? ¿Hay algún aliado o algunos aliados en el Congreso norteamericano?
Yes, Gabriel speaks better on that than me, but we have on both sides of the aisle allies.
Yes, so over the past year and a half, John and I have been to the US 5 times, advocating for Julian, building up a coalition, building up allies. We toured the US. We visited 15 cities last June, speaking to people all across the US, but particularly, in Congress, like John said, it's a bipartisan issue. It's not a left issue, it's not a right issue. It's a principle, it's a democratic principle. So, we have Congress people like Thomas Massey, who's a Republican. Rand Paul, a Republican senator, has come out and called for this Espionage Act prosecution to be dropped. You have progressives like Congressman Ro Khanna, Pramila Jayapal, Ilhan Omar. So you have these people on both sides of the aisle who are speaking out against this persecution of Julian Assange, and actually what it means for Americans, what it means for their First Amendment and their freedom of speech in their own country. And the Progressive Caucus in the US is supportive as well. So we're working with them to draft a letter to Merrick Garland and President Biden. So there is quite a bit of support in the Congress in the US. And we were in the Senate, we were in the Mexican Senate yesterday. We had a meeting with senators, and that's what we asked senators there, is to speak to their counterparts. Speak to their counterparts in the US. Let them know that this persecution of Julian affects us as well. It's not only affecting people in the US, it's affecting people in Mexico, it's affecting people in the UK.
Yes.
And there is a huge political movement all around the world. The German Bundestag actually voted inside the Bundestag to make Julian's freedom an official issue in their committees. And so on this day...
Todo el Parlamento.
Sí.
Todo el Parlamento.
Yes.
Perfecto.
And so today you have the American-German Friendship Group, who's a group of politicians from all parties have travelled to the US. They're meeting with their counterparts as we speak. And on their official agenda is Julian's freedom. So it's circumstances like this. In Australia we have 41 parliamentarians, official Julian Assange Friendship Group as part of the parliament. In France you have 49 parliamentarians. In Austria, in Switzerland, in Spain, in Greece, a third of the parliament is part of the group. Even in the UK, you have Conservative MPs and Labor MPs who come together. There's 23 of them who have written a letter to President Biden asking for these charges to be dropped. So there's a worldwide political movement, and these politicians represent millions of normal people. Every single politician, they're voted in there by people like you and me.
Exacto.
And these people care about Julian Assange. They care about their democratic rights. And so these politicians represent this global movement that consists of millions and millions of people all over the world. So it's really an amazing thing, an amazing phenomenon that we see growing and growing as we travel from place to place.
Genial. Una última pregunta que no quiero dejarla pasar. En el documental se habla mucho del estado de ánimo delicado de Julian Assange y del estado de salud. En estos momentos, ¿cómo es el estado de salud y el estado psicológico del propio Julian?
Well, today when we spoke, of course, he was his mood was quite lifted, you know, because the gift of President Obrador and the gift of the key of Mexico City. But overall, after 13 years of arbitrary detention and 7 years of psychological torture and 3 years of malicious and bureaucratic intent to keep Julian incommunicado, it's little known that Julian is not allowed to speak for himself. So consequently, Gabriel and Stella have to speak for him. Those are the general circumstances of his well-being. Physically, of course, last we saw, I think in August, we saw Julian, and he had put on a little weight, which was heartening. But overall, his circumstances, of course, remain dire.
Wow. Pues muchísimas gracias. Muchas gracias por su presencia, por su participación y toda la solidaridad de nosotros y de quienes nos están viendo aquí en Voces Públicas. No nos dejen, nos vemos en la próxima semana y libertad para Julian Assange. Gracias.
Este lunes a las 17 horas es momento de analizar nuestra convivencia con la vida marina y buscar que sea de modo responsable.
La especie humana es muy dada a explotar hasta el límite sus recursos, sin estar pensando en que tiene